Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Happy Monday. All of a sudden, it seems like Joe Biden is shooting an awful lot of things out of the sky. Have you noticed? It's not your imagination. Last Sunday, of course, the Pentagon took down that enormous Chinese spy balloon after it had already surveilled our entire country from the Aleutian Islands to South Carolina. You thought the trend was over, but no. On Friday, the White House announced that fighter jets had downed an object the size of a car over Alaska. Then on Saturday, an American F-22 shot down another unidentified object over Canada. Then on Sunday, an F-16 took out what the pilot said looked like a flying octagon 20,000 feet over Lake Huron. This apparently was the same object that the Pentagon had dismissed as a radar anomaly the night before as it hovered over Montana. Montana Congressman Matt Rosendale was not convinced. He said it looked very real to him, and apparently he was right. But what was it? What exactly were all three of these objects? As of yesterday, nobody seemed to know. Listen to the commander of NORAD, Air Force General Glenn Van Herk, pointedly say that the U.S. government has not ruled out the possibility of extraterrestrials.
Because you still haven't been able to tell us what these things are that we are shooting out of the sky, that raises the question, have you ruled out aliens or extraterrestrials? And if so, why? Because that is what everyone is asking us right now.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Helene. I'll let the intel community and the counterintelligence community figure that out. I haven't ruled out anything at this point. We continue to assess every threat or potential threat unknown that approaches North America with an attempt to identify it.
Could be aliens. So here you have three unknown objects in 3 days. If these things are extraterrestrial, what we're seeing is an alien invasion. And that means at some point they're probably going to demand to be taken to our leader. And what are we going to say then? This is Kamala Harris. She once dated Montel Williams, but now she runs our country because her boss is senile? Ooh, pretty embarrassing. Thankfully, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Privately, the U.S. government does not believe these things came from another planet. Whatever they are, they were floating, carried along by wind currents. That means they're lighter than air and therefore unable to enter our atmosphere without burning up. They must have come from Earth. In other words, they're what we Earthlings call balloons. Balloons. Heard the word before? What's weird is that no one in charge is willing to say the B word out loud. Watch Flack John Kirby refuse to describe the flying octagon over Michigan.
Can you tell us anything more about this octagonal object? How big was it?
We're still trying to assess what that was. I'm not going to get into a description. I've seen the press reports about what it looked like. I think we all need to be humble here in terms of what our ability is to positively identify stuff from fighter aircraft that are going several hundred miles an hour past, essentially, in terms of relative motion, a stationary object that was not very big. So we don't know what this exactly looked like, and again, we're still not sure exactly what the purpose of it was or who owned it.
Well, he's got a necktie on and he's standing in front of a podium, but is this normal? Is this the way things are supposed to work? We shot these things down, but we have no idea what they were. We don't know where they came from or what they were doing here. That's what he's saying. That's what they're all saying. And maybe that's true. On the other hand, this is the same administration that sabotaged the Nord Stream pipeline, the single biggest act of industrial terrorism in history, and continues to lie about it. So on the other hand, maybe it's not true. NORAD says the U.S. has just readjusted its radar filter, so all of a sudden we're seeing all these objects in the sky we didn't know were there, flying at altitudes that pose an obvious threat to commercial airliners. Okay. And you should take that seriously, especially because it's just been reported, we cannot confirm this, but you've got to wonder, that at least one of these objects was a National Weather Service balloon. Again, unconfirmed, but if that's true, it would mean the Biden administration used fighter jets to shoot down its own balloon, and we really are becoming Fetterman Nation. Let's hope that's not true. We're starting to suspect it might be. Either way, what we know for certain tonight is that there is chaos in America's domestic airspace. That has never happened before. It's not a good sign. There's chaos on the ground, too, a lot of it. 10 days ago, for example, a train derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. That's about 50 minutes outside Pittsburgh. Apparently, there was some kind of mechanical failure. We still don't have details on what that failure was. Of course we don't. We do know about 50 cars derailed. At least 10 of them were carrying thousands of gallons of highly dangerous chemicals, including vinyl chloride, which causes cancer. Watch.
It started with a thunderous boom, and then a huge plume of thick black smoke that could be seen for miles. This was the moment officials in East Palestine, Ohio had been planning for, a controlled release of toxic chemicals from several train cars at the site of a derailment, one that has forced thousands from their homes.
And all the way around, everybody's frustrated and like to go home.
The decision to conduct a controlled release came just days after the train derailed in the rural Ohio community, sparking a massive fire. As the blaze continued to burn through the weekend, concerns quickly escalated. That's because 5 of the train cars carried the chemical vinyl chloride, an unstable material with the potential to explode, shooting deadly shrapnel up to a mile away and releasing toxic fumes into the air.
We don't want to second guess anybody. We got to assume everybody involved was doing their best under a highly stressful situation. But did you see that mushroom cloud? That was caused on purpose. And maybe there's a good reason. Again, no second guessing. But what it means is those clouds of toxic smoke flew up and out. And that toxic smoke almost immediately began killing animals. Dead fish washed up on shore. As one hazardous materials specialist put it, we basically nuked a town with chemicals. So then representatives from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, arrived to restore calm. Yes, an EPA spokesman explained, chemicals from the derailed train did enter the local watershed, and yes, they did kill fish. But the drinking water supply remains totally safe. The fish are dead, but go ahead and fill your thermos and brew some coffee. Everything's fine. Now, we don't know if the locals in East Palestine are drinking the water tonight, but we can tell you the Biden administration doesn't seem too concerned about it either way. Donald Trump got over 71% of the vote in the county in the last presidential election. That's not exactly the Democratic Party's core demographic. Fentanyl, toxic waste spill, whatever. They're not our voters. And by the way, what does a chemical spill have to do with climate change? If you can't use it to sell solar panels, it's not really an environmental disaster. That's the rule in Washington. So no one in the Biden administration bothered to issue warnings to communities that might be in the path of those toxic mushroom clouds you saw floating up from the train wreck, because no one cared enough to do that. Pete Buttigieg is the official who's supposed to be in charge of our transportation infrastructure. Technically, he's the transportation secretary. At an appearance today, he seemed to have no idea that there was a train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. His real concern, he explained, is that we have too many damn white construction workers in this country.
We have heard way too many stories from generations past of infrastructure where you got a neighborhood, often a neighborhood of color, that finally sees the project come to them, but everyone in the hard hats on that project looking like, doing the good-paying jobs, don't look like they came from anywhere near the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's the problem, Mayor Pete. Too many white guys in hard hats. Why didn't we realize this before we built all this infrastructure that's now crumbling? It's actually not funny, and future historians will marvel at just how much damage one incompetent narcissist can cause when he's elevated to a serious job, like transportation secretary. Here's a guy who could not on a bet, who could not at gunpoint change his own tire, who oversees our roads, railways, and airports, all of which are crumbling from mismanagement and neglect. And not just from mismanagement and neglect, but also from actual acts of sabotage. Over the last 2 years, the FBI has investigated more than 40 cases of rail sabotage in Washington state alone, in one state. Now, a lot of those attacks involve so-called shunt devices. Those are wires stretched between tracks that interfere with the train's electrical signals and cause derailments. In one incident, just before Christmas in 2020, a shunt caused a train to derail in Custer, Washington. That train spilled 30,000 gallons of crude oil and forced locals to evacuate their homes. Well, that's not the environmental disaster that Joe Biden talks about, because, of course, he can't buy solar panels from the Chinese to fix it. but it was, objectively speaking, an act of terrorism. The interesting thing is, very often, in fact, in the majority of cases, people who commit acts of terrorism against infrastructure, whoever they are never punished. And the ones who are caught aren't really punished. One woman who tried to destroy trains using a shunt got out of jail after only a year. Oh. So no one's paying any attention and no one really seems to care, because what does that have to do with environmental racism and climate? And possibly as a result of that attitude, there are an awful lot of train derailments in this country, many more than you may realize. In the last calendar year, more than 1,000 trains went off the tracks in the United States. Oh, how's that for a metaphor? Just today, 2 more trains derailed. One of them was in South Carolina and one was in Texas near Houston. The train near Houston was also carrying hazardous materials, as so many trains are. What's going on here exactly? We're not even going to guess. But we can tell you the chaos is not limited to our rail system. There have also been many recent attacks on our power grid. Very few of those attacks have been widely reported. Last year, there were more than 100 attacks of them in the United States, attacks on our power grid. In North Carolina this winter, for example, nearly 50,000 people lost their power in freezing temperatures when somebody shot up 2 energy substations. And so on. Why is it not a big story? Oh, it's not a story at all. And then, of course, at the same time, we've also seen a series of bizarre accidents befalling the food industry, threatening our food supply. That would include unexplained fires and plane crashes in processing plants, to chicken feed that seems to stop egg production. Boy, next they'll be coming for the water. Oh, wait, they are. Less than a month into the Biden administration was also a highly sophisticated attack on the water supply outside Tampa.
Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Galtieri says a water treatment plant operator first noticed the remote access hack. The bad actor increased the amount of sodium hydroxide, or lye, in the water supply from 100 parts per million to more than 11,000. For the 15,000 residents of Oldsmar, Florida, the increase of sodium hydroxide in the water supply could have caused vomiting, chest, and abdominal pain.
This type of activity and this type of hacking of critical infrastructure is not necessarily limited to just water supply systems. It can be anything.
Oh, an attack on our water supply. That's weird. I didn't read that in the New York Times. But what's interesting, not to connect the dots or anything, that was not the only attack on our water supply that year. In January 2021, there was a similar effort to poison the water treatment plant that serves the San Francisco Bay Area. An unidentified hacker accessed the facility's computers remotely. According to NBC, quote, after logging in, the hacker deleted programs that the water plant used to treat drinking water. Now, fortunately, in this case, somebody noticed it. The next day, the attack was discovered and those programs were reinstalled, so nobody got poisoned. But they kept trying. There were similar hacks of water treatment facilities in California in August of 2021. There was one in Maine in July of 2021. There was one in Pennsylvania in May of 2021. In Nevada in March. In New Jersey in September of 2020. In Kansas in March of 2019. And so on. So who's looking after our water supply? Water, that's kind of basic. Well, that's the job of the EPA. But what does protecting the water have to do with passing out cash in the name of remediating environmental racism? Oh, nothing! So they're not paying attention. In fact, they're not paying attention to such an extent that even the Washington Post, which is a shill for the administration if there ever was one, pointed out that, quote, for more than 2 decades, the EPA has not been resourced or organized to secure the nation's water and wastewater sector against physical and cyber threats. Wait a second. So nobody's paying attention to the most critical infrastructure, not the racist roads, but food, water, energy, transportation infrastructure, food, water, energy infrastructure. What does that add up to? Oh, that adds up to a country. You can't have a country without those things. And in every single case, whatever the cause, our food, water, energy, and infrastructure are being degraded. Who knows why? If you didn't know any better, you'd think there might be a war going on. Why is no one talking about this? Subscribe to the Fox News YouTube channel to catch our nightly opens, stories that are changing the world and changing your life. From Tucker Carlson Tonight.